Module 4: Future Directions and Responsible Innovation in XR. Shaping the Health and Care Workforce of Tomorrow. Lesson 7. Ethical and Psychological Aspects of VR in Clinical Care. Welcome back. Today, we'll dive into a critical topic that shapes how we implement VR in healthcare: the ethical and psychological aspects of using VR in clinical care. While VR offers immense promise, its adoption must be guided by thoughtful consideration of ethical implications and the psychological effects it can have on both patients and clinicians. My name is Januario Sana, and I'll guide you through this nuanced discussion to ensure that we approach VR in a responsible, human-centered way. VR's immersive nature is its greatest strength, but it also introduces unique challenges. By simulating realistic environments, VR has the power to deeply affect how individuals think, feel, and behave. This power requires careful stewardship. For example, while VR can reduce anxiety during medical procedures, poorly designed or improperly used applications might inadvertently cause distress or discomfort. Additionally, the data collected during VR sessions raises questions about privacy and consent. Understanding these issues is crucial for healthcare professionals adopting this technology. Now some ethical considerations. Informed consent. Obtaining informed consent is foundational in any medical intervention, and VR is no exception. Patients must understand how the technology works, what it will involve, and any potential risks. For instance, a patient undergoing VR for pain management should be informed about the possibility of motion sickness or emotional discomfort. They should also know whether their session data will be recorded and, if so, how it will be used. Always remember to use plain language to explain the purpose of virtual reality and the potential side effects, and offer patients the opportunity to ask questions and withdraw consent at any time. Privacy and data security. VR systems often collect sensitive data, including physiological responses, behavioral patterns, and even biometric information like eye tracking. This data can be valuable for tailoring experiences but also poses privacy risks if mishandled. For example, a VR session for a pediatric patient might collect data on their heart rate and stress levels to adjust the experience dynamically. While this is beneficial, it's essential to ensure that this data is securely stored and not used beyond its intended purpose. Ensure that all VR systems comply with privacy regulations such as GDPR or HIPAA. And collaborating with IT teams to encrypt data and restrict access to authorized personnel are the best solutions. Equity and accessibility. Ethical implementation of VR in healthcare means ensuring it's accessible to all patients, not just those in well-funded facilities or urban centers. Disparities in access to VR could widen existing healthcare inequities. For instance, while VR may improve pain management for patients in a state-of-the-art hospital, those in rural or underfunded settings might miss out on these benefits. It is important to support cost-effective and scalable VR solutions that can reach underserved populations. Work with organizations or governments to distribute VR technologies equitably. Avoiding manipulation or bias. VR's immersive nature can be used to influence patient behavior, such as encouraging adherence to a treatment plan. While this can be beneficial, there's a fine line between influence and manipulation. For instance, a VR program designed to promote healthy eating should not induce guilt or anxiety in patients. Additionally, biases in VR content, such as cultural insensitivity or stereotypical representations, can alienate certain groups of patients. This requires VR content design with input from different stakeholders to ensure cultural sensitivity and inclusivity, and prioritize transparency on the objectives of VR interventions. Obviously, psychological considerations must also be added to ethical considerations. VR can elicit powerful emotional responses, both positive and negative. While many patients report feelings of calm and distraction during VR sessions, some may experience discomfort, fear, or disorientation, particularly if the content is not carefully designed. For example, a VR scenario simulating a forest might evoke relaxation for one patient but trigger anxiety for another with a fear of the outdoors. Offer a variety of VR experiences to suit individual preferences and sensitivities, and closely monitoring patients during virtual reality sessions, especially if they are trying the technology for the first time, could be great solutions. Long-term psychological impact. The immersive nature of VR raises questions about its long-term psychological effects, especially with repeated use. For instance, could the frequent use of VR for pain management alter how patients perceive pain in the real world? While current research is limited, some studies suggest that VR's impact on neural pathways could have lasting effects, both beneficial and potentially harmful. For this reason, we must remember to use virtual reality as a complement, not as a substitute, for traditional treatments, and no less importantly to raise awareness research on the long-term psychological impact of virtual reality. Clinician burnout and over-reliance on technology. While much of the focus is on patients, we must also consider the psychological effects of VR on clinicians. For example, reliance on VR for training might unintentionally reduce hands-on experience. Additionally, clinicians tasked with implementing VR may feel added stress, especially if they lack proper support. The possible solution is to provide doctors with adequate training and resources to use virtual reality with confidence, and encourage a balanced approach that integrates virtual reality with traditional methods. As we integrate VR into clinical care, it's crucial to balance innovation with ethical and psychological responsibility. This means continually asking questions like, are we prioritizing the patient's well-being above all else? Are we transparent about how VR affects patients and how their data is used? Are we addressing barriers to access and inclusivity? By keeping these questions at the forefront, we can ensure that VR enhances healthcare without compromising the trust and safety of our patients. The ethical and psychological dimensions of VR will only grow more complex as the technology evolves. Advances in AI and biometric tracking will make VR experiences even more personalized, but they'll also raise new ethical questions about privacy, consent, and autonomy. As clinicians, our role is not just to use these tools but to help shape how they're implemented, advocating for policies and practices that prioritize humanity over novelty. In summary, VR has the potential to revolutionize healthcare, but its power must be wielded responsibly. By understanding and addressing the ethical and psychological aspects of VR, we can ensure that it becomes a tool for healing, empowerment, and equity. Thank you for joining me in this important discussion. In our next and final session, we'll explore the future of XR in nursing and healthcare, looking at emerging trends and innovations on the horizon. See you soon.